What's up, everybody? It's Rob here. It's Tuesday, and we're doing the nightly watch list to recap what went down in the stock market and what to pay attention to for tomorrow and the rest of the week. So, first thing that happened was we got news pre-market that Spotify, their founder, actually stepped down, and he was the chief executive officer for the company. So they actually named two co-CEOs at the moment until they can find a permanent replacement. So Spotify stock actually dropped around 5.5% on that news pre-market. Second headline we have for you was CoreWeave, ticker symbol CRWV. They actually inked a deal with Facebook or Meta for $14 billion because they're going to be supplying AI cloud capacity. So they actually popped 8% pre-market and continued to run during the day. Also from the administration, Trump said today that a lot of employees may be let go if there's a government shutdown. So if the Republicans and the Democrats can't agree on the spending bill at midnight tonight, the government will go down on a shutdown, and starting tomorrow morning, most government employees will not be working. So that'll be interesting to see, how the market opens up tomorrow on that news and what comes from that. Next, we have the federal tax credits for new and used electric vehicles will also end tonight, right? 12 o'clock, midnight, September 30th. So I want everyone to look at Tesla, right? TSLA for this to see a reaction. I noticed today the stock was down about 1.5%, but going forward, it will be interesting to see if this reduction in the federal EV tax credit will lower demand for electric vehicles. Also, Novo Nordisk had news pre-market that sent the stock down 2.5%, where the company offered some of their employees the choice between a demotion in their pay or being laid off. So the employees have a choice, and the stock went down 2.5% on that news. Also, something I'm covering from the last watch list, OPEC, and they actually discussed increase in production by 500,000 barrels per day monthly over the next 3 months. So keep your eyes on oil to see if the price goes down with those supply increases and the related names that come with that, such as cruise lines and other important names. Trump also today, he committed to spending over $1 trillion on the military in the upcoming year for 2026. So the top name I want to be looking at right now for that is NOC, Northrop Grumman. And you could definitely be looking at some of the other government contractors, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin. They'll definitely, get a bump if Trump does do that $1 trillion in spending. Also, big news on the day was Pfizer and the Trump administration news. So Pfizer and other healthcare companies, have been getting beat up, the past month or two because people are fearful of the tariffs, that were going to get placed on these pharmaceutical companies. But today, the market actually got an answer and cleared up some of the uncertainty that was relating with those tickers. So today, Pfizer, big news came out where they actually agreed to sell their drugs, right, at lower prices, especially through Medicaid. And a new platform is going to be coming out called TrumpRX, which is going to be where you can sell certain drugs directly to consumers at discounted rates. And Trump today said, that we're going to be using the favored nation status to get lower prices. So that stock actually popped Pfizer on that news in a bullish direction because now some of that uncertainty and the fear is starting to unwind out of that name because the market, was expecting worse. Maybe, oh my God, 100% tariff, on pharma imports. But now, the story is leaning positive for the short term, right? Because you're getting rid of some of this uncertainty. But at the end of the day, I mean, the underlying story does lean bearish because, I mean, long-term profitability can be, impacted by lowering prices unless, Pfizer can drive, more volume, right? Sell more products or innovate faster to offset that pricing pressure, which could be done, by selling through this new platform called TrumpRX. So we'll have to wait and see how that turns out. But big news sent Pfizer up 7% today, and that name does not move like that. So that's why you'll see here, I'm going to put on the screen the options chain. Some of these options went up 3,000% today, and you actually had an opportunity to get in on this news. I mean, when the news first came out, you had a little pop, but the stock came down and it presented, a perfect entry opportunity, and it continued to run the rest of the day. Also, we had news today that the SEC is considering to let, stocks trade on chain just like crypto. So, investors could, buy tokenized shares. So you could see stocks like Tesla and Nvidia, trade just like cryptos on crypto exchanges. Also today, we have news that gold is on track for a gain of over 10% this month, which is crazy because if you've been following the price of gold, I mean, it's just been going up and up and up. And, part of that, recent rally is because it was lifted by U.S. shutdown fears and expectations of more Fed rate cuts. Because if, the Fed cuts rates and people can make less money in fixed income, well, they're going to shift those dollars to other assets to make money. And as the Fed cuts rates, the classic debate is, okay, well, if you cut rates, inflation could go up. So, the normal response to combat inflation is to invest in appreciating assets so we have money moving into gold. Also, the S&P 500 recorded its biggest September percentage gain since 2010. So if you've been watching the other videos, I've been talking about how the market has been getting really bubbly, and I see a lot of volatility coming up and into the end of the year because you have a lot of people talking about, a recession's coming up with the Fed rate cuts. But at the same time, you've been seeing a lot of different sectors just straight gassing up. And, this month was exactly that, where, the S&P 500 recorded its biggest September percentage gain since 2010. Also, at the close today, we had Nike report earnings. And that's a really big one because, they were getting hit from earlier in the year on the tariff news. So, the past couple quarters, a lot of investors have been looking at this name to see how they have bounced back. So they actually beat expectations for their net income and their revenue. So they beat on, a top and bottom line, revenue and profitability. And the one thing, though, that investors didn't like was that their gross margin, right? I mean, it beat the estimate at 42.2 versus the estimate of 41.7, but the gross margins dropped, 3%, okay, from the last quarter. So, one could say, all right, Nike did, post a surprise revenue beat, okay, strong EPS, but, they have been trying to, cut prices to increase demand for their products, and we kind of seen that with their gross margins. So yes, the revenue did beat, but their profitability is coming down because their margins are contracting. So that earnings report was a good, sign for the company that, they can turn things around after, Trump's tariffs news. But, we're seeing stabilization for the name. But we still have to make sure that, the margin, right, story maintains intact and demand risk. So I'm recording this video before the conference call comes out and they talk. But, after that conference call, and depending on what management says, we could see this name potentially run in the morning. But at the moment, it had a pop and drop. because it's a little bit of a mixed bag earnings, right? Couldn't call it one way or the other. So that's what I got for you guys today, what went down, what to pay attention to. And, tomorrow, definitely everyone's going to be talking about this government shutdown. If, the market's closed now, if they don't pass it, tomorrow, that's what all eyes will be on. And we're going to stay locked in, right? We're going to keep investing in a long-term portfolio and making good trades on the side, all right? Everybody stay locked in. Let's keep making money. Peace.